Yep. Myself, Srinivasan Sekar, API member, maintainer, Selenium contributor, contributor to various open source repositories like ATD and ThoughtWorker.
And I'm Fathima Harris. I think he's done a good job introducing me. I am also a thought worker and have done everything he said I've done.
Today we are going to talk about next generation front-end testing with WebDriver and Chrome DevTools, basically DevTools. Yeah. So myself and Fathima have been working with a couple of clients in ThoughtWorks. And we are working on a web application for one of our customers. It's a responsive web application. We test across different form factors, and then it's a progressive as well. Yep. And we had few challenges when we have been approached by one of our customers when we had a customer study, wherein we have to test the application across different network conditions because one of the major use cases was to see how because the users were most of our users were in tunnel, tube. So we have very less, there are a lot of possibilities of network latencies. So we need to test how does my application behaves in a faster 4G and transition over slower 3G. And then there are high chances we might get it into an offline. So we need to check how an application, web application behaves when it is in faster network and then transitioning over a slower network. Yeah, that was one of the challenges that we had when one of our customers approached us.
Another challenge that we were presented with was the application had a lot of third-party applications, third-party services that they were integrating with. And to address this challenge in their automation, they had gone with mock servers, right? So the challenge was that they had a lot more third-party services that they were integrating with. And we found as more and more services were being integrated into the app, maintaining these mock servers were getting harder and harder. So we were really keen on understanding how do we simplify these maintenance challenges as in when the number of integration grows. So that is one challenge that we had.
And I remember our customer team had a bunch of WebDriver scripts and also had almost 1,000+ JSONs with a mock server running and referring those 1,000+ JSON. Over a period of time, it was very difficult to maintain those 1,000+ JSONs to simulate different conditions they had. And one other challenge was simulating the geolocation, because the application, same application being deployed in different geographical locations, and the functionality is different for different geographical locations as well. And another thing is the application works only on that specific geographical locations. So when we test from a different geographical location, we need to mock those geographical locations. So it's very difficult. So that was one of the challenges that we had faced. So we have to mock it up basically manually. Then we have to check all the functionalities specific to the geographical location comes up and works seamlessly.
And one other really cool feature that they were planning to build at the time was push notification. And how they were going to implement this was using service workers. So service workers are scripts that run in the background of your browsers, and they're separated from your apps itself. So for rich offline experiences, for features like push notification, you would use something like a service worker to make that happen, right? So we were really interested in understanding how do we go about testing this and automating it. So this was one challenge that this new feature was bringing in that we had to address. So we had an existing set of tests. We had all of these new features and existing challenges that we had. So the first question that Srini and I asked ourselves is, OK, we have to automate, but before that we have to test it manually, right? And how would we do that? So the first thing that came to our mind was DevTools. And I'm sure a lot of us would have played around with DevTools, right? You want to understand what network calls are being made. You open up your browser, you right-click, you open your developer tools, and voila, right? You go to the network tab, you monitor what's happening there. you have, it's not just a network tab, you have a lot of options that open up over there, right? You have your console, you have your performance, your security, your application. You want to clear your storage, you go to application tab and you clear your storage, right? So a lot of the challenges that we had, if you had to test manually, you could easily do it with your DevTools. So for example, switching between various networks, like your 3G or 4G, or even switch to an offline mode, you could do that from your network tab. You could simulate geolocations. You can do that from your Senses tab. Right, so all of these challenges that we had, we could test it manually from your Chrome, DevTools.
And another basic thing that we all have done in past is we go to DOM using our debugger, at least capture the X path. I believe you would have done that at least once in your WebDriver career. Or, yep. So we go and inspect our DOM, how does it looks like, and we also change CSS over the fly in the debugger. And I remember another instance where my developers used to change the live production code without deploying it. They can go ahead and do a console debugging in the debugger itself. So that was one of the greatest assets, wherein it helps us to do quite a lot of opportunities, like capturing the network. We have gone to a network tab. We all would have gone to the network tab and see what all network requests that our web application makes. Yep. So we have seen this, and we have done this manually. How we can do this programmatically? That was always a question mark for us. And then comes Chrome came up with DevTools as a protocol, which is quite generic, and it doesn't just allow us to instrument a browser. It also helps us to profile it as well, and also gone for audit tools, and we can check our web applications accessibility score of it, and we can use emulation to even emulate in different conditions, different network conditions in network tab. So there are a lot of domains that Chrome DevTools protocol has been segregated into, and all these domains have a set of APIs to talk to our web browser. So this debugger is also a web application. If you look at the debugger, it's also a web application which is designed using web technologies. So what does it mean is the debugger, you can even debug the debugger, profile the profiler in the debugger, or you can run an audit in the audit panel of the debugger. So that's cool. And this Chrome DevTools protocol, it's not just been adopted or built by Chrome team, and it's been widely used and adapted by multiple other browser vendors available in market. So Chrome has this built in, and for other browsers like Mozilla, and recently we had Microsoft Edge built on top of Chromium, which all uses adapters, which internally communicates to your web browsers using WebSockets. So all these are possible using remote debugging protocol. So Chrome on 65 version and above a year ago has opened this opportunity. So multi-remote debugging support. So it's not necessarily a single client or a single browser or a single debugger that can talk to your Chrome browser or any browser. We can have communication from different ends. We can have multiple clients talk to a single browser instance. So it's not necessarily a browser talking to, or it's not necessarily browsers as a clients. Yep. All these communications between a debugger and the browser happens in a JSON protocol, which is a WebSocket messages. The WebSocket messages are all documented in Chrome DevTools directory. So if you look at a WebSocket message, so if you look at the contract, we have a contract defined for clearing the data storage of a web application. So the API exactly comes under storage domain, clear data for a particular origin. So it takes up two arguments. One is the web application that we wanted to clear the storage for, and next is what kind of storage that we wanted to clear. Either it is session storage or a local storage, or you want to wipe off the entire storage that the web application has. So let's have a short demo on how we can do this manually, how we can clear the communication, how we can establish the communication, and how we can clear the session storage manually.
Cool. So before we get started with how we make that WebSocket connection and all of that, let's first take a quick look at how do we even find that object and understand what is the right API that we want to hit and what are the different arguments that you have to send and all of that, right? So first, let's try and simulate that manually. So I have loaded this website, and if you look at the local storage, you can see it has some data over here. And if you come here, you can see there are about 44 KB worth of data stored on the browser. So what I'm going to do is I have something called the protocol monitor that I have opened up here. This is something that you would have to enable from the experiments tab, but it's there. It's something that all of your Chrome browsers got. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and clear this site data. And you can see under the protocol monitor. So protocol monitor basically tells you what are the different network calls that are being made while you're doing all of these cool things with your Chrome DevTools. So you can see here the API that Srini was talking about earlier is under the storage domain. It's called clear data for origin. So you got the API or the method, and it also specifies all the arguments that you have to pass. Now, if this is not sufficient, what you can do is you can just right-click, and it will take you to the Chrome DevTools protocol documentation. And it will take you exactly where the documentation for that particular API is. That makes your work a little easier. Now you read up a little bit, understand what your different options are, understand your arguments, and so on and so forth. So if you just take a quick look here, you can see all the different domains that are there, basically all the tabs that you see in your DevTools. You will have all of that here, and all of your APIs are grouped under these domains, and you can find documentation for all of that over here. So we've got the WebSocket object. The next thing that we need to do is we need to open up your browser with your debugging on, right? So that's what I have done here. So I have opened up my Chrome. I've specified remote debugging on this particular port. And what this will do is it'll open up a new Chrome instance with your debugging mode on, right? So we've got that. So we've got the object, we've got the browser. What do we need to do? We now need to make a connection, right? And to make a connection, what you need is the URL to make the connection, right? To make the network call. So to get that, what you can do is all you need to do is hit this endpoint on your port that you have enabled your debugging, and that will give you your WebSocket debugger URL. And now, all that's left to do is make the connection. Now, you are going to make a WebSocket connection, and to do this, you have a lot of WebSocket clients that are out there. We have chosen a Chrome extension to do this for us. It's called Smart WebSocket Client. And all you need to do is you specify the WebSocket URL that you just found from here, and you give your object, right? And now you need to make the connections. And just so you know it works, let's just make sure that the data is here. It's here. And I'm going to go and make the connection. Cool, it's connected, and send. All right, let's go here, and you can see it's done. So that is how so now we just saw how to make the connection, and we saw this example with clear storage, but all the other APIs that are there in the documentation, you can perform all of that in this manner. So we saw how we do that manually. Now, how do we do it programmatically, right? What does that mean to our Selenium tests? So before we jump into how it's possible via Selenium, let's just take a quick refresher on what our WebDriver architecture looks like. I'm sure a lot of us would be familiar with this. So you have your language-specific WebDriver clients, where your tests specify what particular action that it needs to do, right? Like your driver.navigate or your driver.click, right? So you have that, for your Java, Ruby, and so on and so forth. So you have that, and your client talks to your WebDriver, which understands what is the user action that you're trying to do. And what's left to do is talk to your browsers. So your browsers that there are a lot of browsers out there. You have your Chrome, you have your IE, your Edge, Firefox, and so on and so forth. So each of them have a browser-specific driver that's there that the Selenium WebDriver uses to communicate with your browser. So that's how your tests work. So it's cool. Your WebDriver has all of these amazing capabilities to perform user actions as you would specify. Now, what if it had this additional superpower of actually making a WebSocket connection as well? So like Srini was saying earlier with Chrome 63 and higher, the feature that we just got from 63 and higher is that you have multi-client remote debugging, which means now you can not only perform browser actions, but you can also make WebSocket connections while you're at it. And what that means is you can also talk, like while you're performing all of those really cool user actions, you can also talk to your Chrome DevTools protocol and make magic happen, right?
Yep.
So let's see how that happens.
So how many of us have used WebDriver version 3? Yeah, Simon is. How many of us used WebDriver version 4, Alpha 3? I think Simon released it a couple of days back. It looks like only Simon and Jim. Okay, so we'll have a short demo on how we can do all these things programmatically in WebDriver version 3. Then we can see what has changed in WebDriver version 4. So we have seen how we can actually clear the storage of a browser where the web application stored all the cache. So we have to establish the WebSocket communication. If you have gone through the manual demo, like we have to establish the WebSocket communication. Then we have to figure out the API and all the arguments that it takes and send those WebSocket messages. So what we have done here in this test is, so we have a Chrome driver which opens up the Chrome browser, which we all have done it, and the Chrome browser also has to accept WebSocket communication. So we have figured out WebSocket debugger URL. We have picked up one of the WebSocket client in Java, and then we figured out WebSocket debugger URL after we opened the remote debugging support. Then once we got the WebSocket debugger URL, and we are going to send WebSocket messages to it. So for that, in order for clear storage test to work, the API that we are referring to is clear data store for origin, clear data for origin. It takes up two arguments, as we've seen. One is the web application URL, and another one is storage types. So we are going to send this. We have constructed a JSON object out of it, and we are going to send this for the API using send message command. Yep. Let's have a quick look how we can clear the storage in Selenium version 3. The Chrome driver has opened this browser and also launched the application. Behind the scenes, it also ingested WebSockets. So now if you see, there is no storage. It has cleared up. So this all happens behind the scenes. So, and the next demo is on how we can mock the Selenium conf website with website. I'm going to replace all the images that our Selenium conf website has with Selenium conf logo. Let's see how does it looks. And in order to do that, we have to figure out, we have to intercept the network so that we can change or alter the image URL of it. So we have set network interceptor, which is the API, which is coming under network domain, which takes up arguments. One of the argument is the image URL, and we are going to do the same way. We are going to establish the communication once Chrome driver has launched the browser and launched the URL. We are going to establish WebSocket communication by using one of the WebSocket client that we have, and then we are going to push the WebSocket message. Yep. Let's see how does our Selenium conf website looks like. Ooh. Cool. Little bit ugly. It's okay. And We have seen this in Selenium version 3. So what we have basically did is we have established a sent a WebSocket message using send methods. So what happened in Selenium 4 Alpha 3, which is the latest version that got released few days back. So Selenium 4 has wrapper for many of the domains that exist in CDP. And one of that we picked up is network. We are going to do the same exercise in Selenium 4. So we have an emulate network condition wrapper method, which takes up arguments. One of the argument is latency and how much throughput it's going to take up for download and upload. So basically, we are going to simulate the network bandwidth. So that was one of the challenges that we have discussed, how we can see our application behavior in different networks during the flow of a customer journey. So we are going to simulate cellular 3G network and test how does our Selenium conf Wi-Fi speed looks like. So yep, let's have a quick run. So we have an emulate network condition method that takes up these arguments. We can also set offline true or false. It's a bit slower. So this helps us to test our application on different network conditions. We can load one web page in a faster 4G, and then we can load another another web application or another web page of that application in a cellular 3G. And we can even switch the network connection to offline and see how my application behaves during a customer journey. Yep.
I think it's throttled, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. So next, there is two ways to do this. One, using emulate network condition wrapper method exposed by Selenium 4. And next is, how many of us have ingested JavaScript in your web browser? Have you heard about JavaScript executor? Oh, cool. So yeah. So we have a method for CDP. So we can also ingest a WebSocket as like how we ingested JavaScripts using JavaScript executor or execute script method wrapper function. So we have a execute CDP command that takes up the API and also augments to it. So in order to perform the same simulation of network bandwidth, so we are going to send, we are going to enable the network, then we are going to send the same arguments like offline, whether the state of the offline is true or false, and then whether it's a cellular 3G, fast 4G, or offline, all the arguments using execute CDP command. Let's have a short demo. We once again test the Selenium conf Wi-Fi. Yep, it's still loading the sets. So the reason why we have two different ways to automate this is there are a lot of, I remember Simon and Jim were talking about this in Twitter some months ago. A lot of APIs that are exposed by Chrome DevTools are experimental and few been deprecated. So it's not possible to deprecate the consistent method in Selenium wrapper and release a version out just for that. So we can use all these experimental and deprecated methods, just referring the documentation and construct appropriate network, construct appropriate methods and send using send using the second one, that's CDP command, send CDP command method. So which also helps us to play around with experimental APIs exposed by Chrome DevTools. Yep. So
loading, it's taking
I think
a while.
it's taking time. And next we are going to have another demo on how we can mock the geolocation. Let's manually see where we are. So we have picked up an application developed by Dave Afner. So this is the latitude and longitude where we are exactly in. Yep, it just took the exact lat long and accuracy. So let's simulate this network location, like simulate the geolocation. So we had an application where we need to simulate geolocation, and functionality specific to that application turns on only on that specific geolocation. And if we, because it's the same web application being deployed on different geographical location, and the functionalities are different for different geographical location. So let's send latitude and longitude as a WebSocket message for one of the API. Which is coming under emulation, which is, the API exactly is set geolocation override. So we have to send the mocked latitude, longitude, and how much accuracy do we need, and we can just post this using execute CDP command. So let's see where we are taking you all through. Ooh. We moved to India now. Yep. So this browser has been actually opened and controlled by Chrome driver and launched by Chrome driver. All these WebSocket communication happens behind the scenes. So it's much smoother, and you don't need to worry about hitting the JSON list endpoint, taking the WebDriver web debugger URL, and send the socket messages. So all this been handled well in Selenium 4. I believe you folks also go ahead and try these CDP features and give us the feedback to the community. And as Simon mentioned in the morning, there was other features being released in Selenium 4 as well. Over part of 3 alpha versions got released. One was a relative locators. So it helps us to figure out near, far, relative to a particular locator, an object related to another particular object. So it helps us to figure out an object is after the other object or before another object, it is far to an object or not, just by looking at the user interface, not by going through the DOM. Yep, and another overall were on build systems that Simon has mentioned in the morning. So a lot of cool features been added in Selenium 4, and grid has been overwritten. So it should be much smoother now. So just go ahead and explore all these opportunities and then give us feedbacks. So we will have further alpha versions and beta versions on Selenium 4. So as I said initially, it's not the multi-remote debugging is not just been handled by the browsers, not just need to be a browser. The client can be, so one of the demo that we have seen was using one of the Chrome extension. And we can do the same thing using Chrome debugger itself. And we can do the same thing on other browsers as well, because they have an adapter, and which uses remote debugging support of DevTools protocol. So it's not necessarily it has to be the browser vendors. So it can be other node modules. The other node modules which implemented this Chrome DevTools protocol were Puppeteer, Tycho, WebDriver IO. So WebDriver IO also implemented Puppeteer under the hood. Yep. These are the node modules that also implemented Chrome DevTools as a protocol. Yep. I hope you all go ahead and give a try and do all the next generation cool stuffs that you can automate too. And that's us. Any questions?
Thank you.